let's go ahead and talk about the best movies of 2025. I have seen a lot of movies in 2025. Not every single film. It's impossible to do something like that. I'm sure there's some loonies out there that were able to do that, but not me. But I've seen a lot of them. I've seen quite, dozens upon dozens of movies this year. And thankfully, I feel like I've seen more good movies than bad movies this year, which is kind of surprising because I think a lot of people that, do film criticism or whatever, just review movies, are like, I see a lot of crap. And I think I've been lucky. I think I saw a lot of films that I really enjoyed this year, which kind of made this best of list a little difficult. I have a lot of honorable mentions on this, probably have close to like a dozen honorable mentions. Some which I'll go into more details than others. Some which I'll just mention, of course. But overall, I think this has been a pretty entertaining year for film. There's been there's a nice variety of genre pictures, drama, wonderful animated movies, and a lot of these movies and just overall experiences are certainly going to stick with me and just have been some of my favorite cinematic experiences so far this decade, which is awesome, which is really, really cool. So, before we get into the top 10, though, and I encourage you guys also ponder your top 10, go ahead and post them, obviously, in just a bit. I want to see them. I want to read them. I want to discuss them with you guys, and also your honorable mentions, because that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to talk about my some of my favorite films that just didn't quite make the list. Maybe they were on the list for most of the year, but they got, sadly kicked off because there was just other movies that I just thought were better. But these are movies that I really enjoyed. And starting off the top, and these honorable mentions aren't maybe in any specific order, maybe a couple of the last ones. But one movie that really surprised me this year was Final Destination Bloodlines. Final Destination Bloodlines was such a surprise. It's easily the best entry in the franchise. And it just surprised me with how much emotional depth and humor it packed alongside just the over-the-top horror and kills. The story essentially follows this character named Stephanie, who's this college student who's just trying to break, the deadly cycle of death that has haunted her family for decades, haunted her grandma for decades. And I just really appreciate how the writing gave weight to the characters' struggles. They weren't just meat for the grinder. Unlike, some previous entries, this one made me genuinely care about who survived and why. And the multi-generational angle, I think, just added stakes that felt really fresh. And the balance between the suspense and the dark humor, and of course the trademark outrageous twists and kills, it kept me really engaged while watching the film. And I'm saying that as someone who's not the biggest fan of the Final Destination movies. Then the tension and spectacle, I think, are just, they were handled really well. Just kind of, of course, turning everyday objects into fiendishly clever death traps that are as inventive as they are, horrifying. Like Death, he was kind of coasting those last couple of movies, but he brought his A game for this one. He is like, you don't understand. I've been thinking about these kills. And the practical effects and the CGI, I think, were really fun in the film. The pacing is quite good in the movie. And the movie even finds room for, I think, a really touching tribute to Tony Todd, who sadly, passed away last year. He's been featured in so many movies, so many genre films, famously played Candyman, of course. This was his final performance. And his final performance just adds a really nice, quiet, emotional note to the crazy, fun chaos that is in Final Destination Bloodlines. I really enjoyed it. I was so surprised by how much I liked this film. And my next honorable mention is Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts is, easily one of the most engaging and surprisingly grounded entries in the MCU, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What I loved about it is how it just centers on a team of anti-heroes. You got, the new Black Widow, Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, U.S. Agent, Red Guardian, Ghost, Sentry. Not really Taskmaster. No, we're not really talking about Taskmaster. And just it kind of uses their just really uneasy alliance to explore trauma, identity, redemption, depression. The story, it doesn't rely on world-ending stakes or flashy action. It takes time. It takes its time to kind of give each character emotional beats that feel earned. And you got a lot of internal struggles, especially like Yelena, in particular, provides like a powerful thorough line, along with Bill Pullman this century, that just kind of keeps you invested, just making you care about them. Other than just, watching the whole spectacle of it all. And I think Jake Schreier's direction, he balances a lot of that great action with quieter, reflective moments that kind of just let the cast chemistry and personalities and conflicts all shine on full display, Florence Pugh is just great as Yelena. Lewis Pullman brings so much depth and centric character I hate from the comics. I liked him so much. He made the character feel more like a character than just like a crazy Superman, knockoff. The visuals, I think, are all really cool. It's a little bit grittier. It's a little more street level. I like that aesthetic. And I think it just set the film apart from a lot of like Marvel fare that delivered still some really great set pieces and just a really engaging story. So Thunderbolts is definitely one of those big surprises this year that I really enjoyed. 2 Predator movies, chat. We have 2 Predator movies that have made my honorable mentions. The first one, of course, is Predator Killer of Killers. It is a really surprising and inventive entry in the Predator franchise, and it just really impressed me. What I love most about it is that it was an animated anthology Predator film, like following 3 distinct stories across different time periods in human history. Viking seeking revenge, a feudal Japanese ninja and samurai caught in a family conflict, World War II pilot facing another worldly threat in the air, in the Atlantic theater. And it still keeps the tension and stakes like really high. Each segment has its own personality and emotional core, so you care about the characters even before the predators even arrive, which I think is very smart. And it makes all the encounters with the hunters feel intense and overall satisfying. And I think the anthology format overall just keeps the pacing brisk while giving each protagonist their moment to shine, essentially. And the animation, I think, is where the film really stands out. Like Dan Trachtenberg and Joshua Wasson, they use a lot of bold, fluid style that blends, 3D and 2D movement with like kind of that graphic style flair that we've seen in films like or projects like Into the Spider-Verse or Mitchell vs. the Machines or Arcane, and just makes every combat sequence feel like really dynamic and really bloody and really brutal. And even the quiet, almost dialogue-free moments, they rely on a lot of visual storytelling to build tension and atmosphere, which I think works brilliantly, especially in the Ninja Samurai segment in particular, which was my favorite of the shorts. And by the final act, we get like this awesome set piece and a promise of something really cool when it comes to the future of the Predator franchise. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to execute that. But continuing off the Predator franchise, chat, I also, just my honorable mentions, I also got to bring up Predator Badlands. Easily one of the most ambitious and entertaining entries in the series so far. And what I loved about this movie is how it shifts the focus to Deck, who is this young Predator outcast, essentially just striving to prove himself, which gives the story a surprising emotional core. It's set on this super hostile planet called Jenna, and the film turns, survival into just a tense and like really unpredictable adventure in Deck's alliance with Thea, who is this like damaged android, with her own motives. That also adds like depth and some surprising humor, some genuine heart, and their evolving dynamic throughout the movie makes the story feel personal and I think very engaging, which is something that I think the series maybe hasn't always prioritized in past entries. Looking at you, AVP Films. And I think Dan Trachtenberg's direction, again, is, it's confident, it's visually striking. He understands this franchise. He knows what he's doing. We get some really cool landscapes, some great kinetic fight sequences, inventive creature designs that elevate the action every scene and all these different encounters. And, Elle Fanning, she brings a lot of charisma and nuance to Thea, grounds the film's emotional moments, gives us someone else to root for alongside Deck. And the choreography of, like, the Predator versus Predator battles, I think is, like, really, really cool. And the survival sequences are all crisp and intense and thrilling. And yeah, it just feels like the Predator franchise is expanding and getting bigger in a great way. It doesn't feel like it's just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I appreciate that. I think it's being shepherded and handled extraordinarily well right now under Dan Trachtenberg and his team. So both of those Predator films, Chad, highly recommend. That's why my honorable mentions. And my next honorable mention is the Fantastic Four First Steps. We finally have a great Fantastic Four movie. That's not The Incredibles. First Steps, it's just such a wonderful adaptation of Marvel's First Family. And what I love most about it is how it balances the superhero spectacle with the genuine just family dynamics of Reed and Sue and Johnny and Ben. They're not just fighting cosmic threats. They're working together and navigating their relationships as a family, which gives the story that emotional weight that is necessary in a Fantastic Four adaptation. I think the script moves at a really nice pace, never sacrifices character development for action, and the film captures, for the first time, the spirit of the Fantastic Four while also establishing its own unique tone within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's fun, it's super heartfelt, It's adventurous, which is what the Fantastic Four is. It's a group of adventurers. And it's just such a standout introduction to this team in the MCU. Shageman's direction, I think, is so confident and visually striking, like blending kind of like that mid-century sci-fi retro design. That it just really works into a superhero landscape that doesn't often see that nowadays. And Pedro Pascal, I think Vanessa Kirby and Joseph Quinn and Evan Moss Bacharach, they bring a lot of warmth and genuine chemistry to their roles. Making this team feel like a family you can root for. I like that they were just kind of already really loving towards each other. That was super nice because I think in a lot of adaptations, they just make the Fantastic Four, in terms of the cinematic adaptations, just all really fucking mean to each other. And I've never liked that. And the action sequences, I think, are all great. Love what they do with Galactus. He looks perfect. He's not a giant fart cloud. He looks so good. Michael Giacchino's score complements the heroic and comedic moments so well. It's like, of course he did the score for The Incredibles, which perfect. Overall, First Steps it's a fun, character-driven superhero adventure that succeeds across the board on an emotional level, on a visual level, and it's a real promising start for the Fantastic Four in the MCU, and I really hope we see more of them. I want more Fantastic. Give me at least 4 Fantastic Four movies. Give me my quadrilogy, but we'll see. But overall, I really liked it. Oh, yeah, and the Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer, I thought how they handled the Silver Surfer, I thought was great. Some fantastic action sequences with the Surfer. And just a couple more honorable mentions, chat. Let's go ahead and talk about one I've seen really recently. Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. That's the full title. Wake Up Dead Man, it's a clever and like really entertaining addition to Rian Johnson's, little mystery universe that he's made. And honestly, it might be just the best of the series yet. The more I think about it, like the story kicks off with this kind of crazy, baffling death within this small town church, and drawing the suspicion towards this young priest before Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc eventually steps into the scene. And what I appreciate most about the film is how it balances the classic whodunit, puzzle stuff with deeper thematic questions, about faith and morality, philosophy, and tension in a way that keeps you guessing, while also giving the characters many of the supporting characters emotional depth. It's not just about solving the crime. It's about understanding the people involved, which makes the mystery feel richer, makes the story more satisfying. And I think Rian Johnson's direction is probably at its best here in these films. It feels very confident, very precise, using a lot of atmospheric visuals, pretty sharp pacing. Just keeps the tension taut without devolving into something that is dull. And Daniel Craig, he feels very at ease, of course, as Benoit Blanc, delivering that signature charm for the character. But Josh O'Connor, man, that's where the movie is really good. Josh O'Connor, he brings just so much warmth and nuance to this young priest at the center of this investigation, and is the standout of the cast, in my opinion. But also you have a great supporting cast of like Glenn Close and Josh Brolin and Jeremy Renner, and certainly others. It's full of a lot of memorable performances that make each suspect feel distinct and engaging. Overall, I think the film it balances the clever plotting, compelling characters with a lot of ease, resulting in a mystery that's both fun and I think also the most thoughtful of any of these films in this series, and is a much better sequel to the original sequel, Glass Onion, which I thought was terrible. And my next honorable mention is Superman 2025. Superman, it is such a warm and refreshing take on one of pop culture's most iconic heroes. After suffering for years with the psychotic, morbid, mopey Zack Snyder version of the character, we finally have a Superman who's a good person again. Thank God. What I loved about James Gunn's direction and writing is that it focused less on the things we constantly see in all these adaptations, the origin tropes, and more on Clark Kent already being Superman, already established as Superman, while still figuring out what it means to be a symbol of hope in a very complex world. I think the story balances the thrilling superhero action with a lot of genuine heart, exploring themes of identity and responsibility and compassion without ever feeling heavy-handed. You know, it's a story that makes you care about the people behind the cape as much as the overall world-saving feats and shenanigans, which gives that film the emotional weight. Which was necessary after the decade of terrible Superman adaptations. And David Cornsweet, he is excellent as Superman. He brings all that warmth and sincerity and the right mix of idealism, of kindness, of charm to the role that you need for Superman. If you don't do that, then I don't know what the hell you're doing. Rachel Brosnahan, I think, is equally strong as Lois Lane, delivering the trademark intelligence and humor and depth that makes her interaction, especially with Clark Kent, with Superman, so engaging and fun. Nicholas Hoult is a very good Lex Luthor, probably the best. He's definitely the best live action Lex Luthor we've ever had. Just defined just by his narcissism and ego and envy. I love that about him. And also a really good supporting ensemble that adds a lot of energy and variety to the film. And visually, the movie is very bright. It's very colorful. It's full of that kinetic energy I think you need. With moments of humor and spectacle. It just that punctuate the quieter and character-driven beats. It's finally a good Superman film. We haven't gotten a good Superman film since 1981, since Superman 2. So it's nice to see another great cinematic live-action Superman film, Chad. It's been a hot minute. Speaking of mans, Chad, let's talk about that Roof Man. We went to a dead man, went to a Superman, and now we got a Roof Man, Chad. And Roof Man is an unexpectedly charming and engaging film that kind of takes a truly bizarre true crime story and turns it into something really heartfelt. The movie tells the story of this guy named Jeffrey Manchester, who is this U.S. Army veteran who robbed dozens of McDonald's by cutting through the roofs, essentially, and later, after he escaped prison, lived inside a Toys R Us for like months, pretty much for like a year. And what I love about this film is how the film balances all the absurd comedies and situations with real emotional depth. It's funny, it's thrilling, and really touching. The writing by Derek Seinfranz, who's also the director, and his co-writer Kurt Gunn, they do a fantastic job of grounding Manchester's just wild, crazy escapades with a lot of genuine human emotion. Exploring the loneliness, the identity crisis, the lack of connections without ever making the story feel schmaltzy or gimmicky, which was a fear of mine going in. It's not in there. Channing Tatum, I think, gives one of the best performances of his entire career. I think this might be his best performance. He's so good, and I think he deserves award attention. He brings so much charisma and vulnerability and kind of offbeat, weird charm to Manchester as a character, and it really does make you root for him despite his, let's say, questionable choices throughout the movie. Kristen Dunst, I think, is also very good as Leigh, the woman who's kind of drawn into his chaotic life, who he establishes a relationship with. There's also some great little supporting cast members here, like Lakeith Stanfield, Peter Dinklage, Ben Mendelsohn. They add a lot of humor and texture to the film, making the ensemble feel like really alive. And the film, I think, it strikes a clear balance between being whimsical and grounded at the same time. Using its quirky premise to just kind of highlight the emotional stakes without ever losing sight of the heart of this story, and definitely one of the biggest surprises this year. I really enjoyed this, and I thought Channing Tatum did a great job. All right, Chad, it's the last of my honorable mentions. Then we get into the top 10. All right, Chad, we talked about a dead man. We talked about a Superman. We talked about a roof man, and now we're talking about a chainsaw man, Chad. My last honorable mention, and this was really hard for me because this was on my best of list, and it just got kicked off. It just got kicked off because I made it a recent addition. But Chainsaw Man, the movie, the Reze arc, is an absolutely fantastic anime film that manages to balance brutal action with real emotional weight. Like, taking place just moments after the ending of season 1, the story essentially focuses on Denji's romance with Reze. This new woman he comes across just seemingly randomly, and just the devastating consequences that follow with that relationship, just blending all these intense fight sequences with like really heartfelt character moments. And what makes this movie, this arc, I guess, so compelling is how it invests us in its characters. Reze, he isn't just like a plot device in the movie, but a fully realized figure whose choices and emotions like drive the story in ways that, in my opinion, hit really hard. And I think the writing does a great job of balancing romance and tragedy, and of course all the chaotic, devil battles you would want, making the narrative certainly thrilling, but again, very emotionally powerful. The animation is nothing short of spectacular. It's a gorgeous film. Absolutely gorgeous film to watch. I love 2D animation, and anytime I'm able to see like a theatrical 2D animation, I'm so appreciative because it's rare nowadays. Every fight sequence is rendered in just fluid, dynamic motion. It just makes the action feel visceral, kinetic, and even quieter, more intimate moments I think are very well done. They're beautifully animated. They're super adorable. Subtle gestures and expressions. Adding the depth of the characters and their journeys and just their overall emotions. And just the lighting in the movie is great. The framing is wonderful. It heightens the tension in a lot of these just huge explosive battles, but also these tender scenes, which are great. And just combined with like a wonderful score and impeccable sound design, the film delivers a cinematic experience that is very faithful, if not more faithful, to like the original manga, since they're closer to that art style. But it also just gives us something that we just don't often see, which is a cinematic 2D movie that is absolutely gorgeous to watch, and that's why it was always, going to be on my honorable mentions, and why for the longest time it was on my top 10. It was, and it was very hard for me to take it off. But it's a great movie. And there are some other films that I also had that I enjoyed this year. Just very briefly, I really liked Mickey 17, Bong Joon-ho's film, Novocaine. I thought was like a really fun, action film with Jack Quaid. I'm a big Jack Quaid guy, so seeing him, he handled himself very well. Ugly Stepsister was a really cool body horror alternative take on Cinderella that I really loved. Highly recommend checking that out if you guys haven't done so. It came out like super early in 2025, but I really love that. One Battle After Another, I think, is one of Paul Thomas Anderson's better films in the last 10 years. Great performances by DiCaprio and Sean Penn and Benicio del Toro. Chase Infinity is a newcomer. It's very well directed, and I personally had I was never able to connect with the story on the emotional level, but a lot of people did. I want to give it a shout out. Toxic Avenger, the long delayed Toxic Avenger was actually pretty good. I really liked the film starring Peter Dinklage. It was fun. It has a lot of heart. It's gross. It's mean. But it's good. And then, of course, technically it's the fourth Naked Gun film. They call it a reboot. It's not a remake. It's not a reboot. It's a continuation. Which, instead of Leslie Nielsen as Frank Drebin, we're now following Frank Drebin Jr., played by Liam Neeson, which is perfect casting. And it's one of the funniest movies of the year. It did a great job of, I think, resurrecting the parody genre, which we haven't seen in a while. Last time we saw it was with like really bad movies like Meet the Spartans and Disaster Movie and stuff like that. This movie captures the heart of those original films and creates some great laugh out loud moments. Really enjoyed the film a lot. But now, my friends, let me take a sip. I'm gonna take a sip right here. I've been doing a lot of yapping. We can get on to the top 10 now. I told you. All right, my friends. At number 10, I have Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Del Toro's Frankenstein is just a haunting and just visually stunning reimagining of Mary Shelley's classic story that manages to feel both timeless and I think also like really deeply personal. The film centers on Victor Frankenstein and, of course, his tragic creation, exploring the consequences of ambition, isolation, and the desire to play God and everything that comes with it. And what sets this adaptation apart, I think, from other adaptations is how it humanizes the creature, presenting him not merely as a monster, but as a sentient, questioning being whose journey of self-discovery is both heartbreaking and really profound and emotional. The story balances the horror and spectacle, there's a lot of spectacle, of the original tale with like moments of depth that make you care about every character, or at least invested in them. And it just grounds the narrative in a lot of real human stakes. And of course, as expected, Del Toro's direction is nothing short of masterful in this movie. Every frame is meticulously composed, from the shadowy, candlelit libraries and laboratories to the icy expanses of the Arctic. The production design, the cinematography just create a world that is both gothic and real and visceral. Great score, heightens the tension, emotion, perfectly complements the visual style. And of course, you know, Del Toro's signature style just elevates the material, like turning the familiar beats into epic cinematic experiences. A lot of grandeur in this movie. And I think the performances across the board are outstanding. Like Oscar Isaac, I think he brings brilliance, obsession, and the tragedy that's necessary to Victor Frankenstein. You know, making his moral and emotional struggle overall very compelling and in some cases relatable. Jacob Elordi gives my favorite performance of the movie. He's great. He delivers a remarkable portrayal of the creature, of Frankenstein's monster, conveying so much vulnerability and intelligence and nuance and anguish with initially just his physical presence and later on with the things that he says. It's a brilliant performance, and he deserves a lot of award recognition. But he also does some really good support performances in the movies. Christoph Waltz, Felix Kammerer, Lars Mikkelsen, Charles Dance, Mia Goth. They add a lot of depth and texture to their respective roles, just making the world feel, you know, very intensely personal. Every actor, I think, contributes to the story. It makes it feel like really intimate. And inevitably, what makes kind of Frankenstein so memorable in like a century of so many adaptations of this story is its ability to just balance the gothic horror with that genuine human emotion. The film is like a meditation on creation and consequence and empathy, you know, as it is like a striking spectacle that, you know, Del Toro has been able to create. You know, he did a fantastic job of adapting one of literature's most iconic sci-fi tales, one of its most iconic scientists, one of its most iconic monsters, crafting a story that is tragic and thought-provoking and emotionally affecting, and that's why it is my number 10. And number 9, Chad, I have in this movie, I couldn't believe it. Because you think because it sounds ridiculous. But like everybody else, I got caught up into it, and I loved it. At number 9, I have K-Pop Demon Hunters. K-Pop Demon Hunters is a thrill ride. A film that manages to be visually dazzling, emotionally engaging, and really inventive all at once. Like, the story essentially follows this group named Huntrix, made up of Rumi, Mira, and Zoe, who are these, like, globally famous K-pop girls who secretly protect the world from these demonic threats, from demons. And what makes the writing so strong is how it just kind of balances the high-stakes supernatural action with, like, a lot of human emotion. The narrative doesn't just rely on its flashy battles. It delves into the identity, insecurities, and friendships between these girls, especially the character of Rumi, who's struggling with her own demonic heritage throughout the film, giving the film a surprising amount of depth, you know, beneath its super kinetic surface. And the directors, Maggie Kane and Chris Applehans, they bring such a bold and confident vision to this project. The animation is brilliant. It's fluid. It's vibrant, blending the energy of kind of like, I assume, the K-pop choreography in real life with really cool and dynamic and poppy action sequences that feel like just so inventive, like in so many of the scenes. Great color palette, too. You know, you have, of course, the dazzling stage performances, the intense battles against all the supernatural, like, demonic forces in the movie, and it has a great pacing and never feels exhausting. Like, the world building, I think, is pretty solid, too. It's so visually rich with the urban landscapes and things, and I think it does a great job of all the fantastical elements. And I think the voice performances are also, like, really, really good throughout the movie. Like, they all feel like they have genuine chemistry, a lot of emotion. It makes you care about you care about these girls, chat. And the supporting cast, I think, does a really good job too. Like, some of the villains that we get in this movie, I think, are really fun in the movie. And the performances, I think, they all balance just all the humor and drama, and heart. And it makes you feel invested in these characters overall. And also, I mean, lastly, you got to mention this. What I think really elevates K-Pop Demon Hunters is the way it integrates music into its story. The original songs, including, you know, the big showstopper like Golden, you know, they aren't just there in the background. They're not just there because they need to have them. They drive the emotional arcs and they heighten the tension in the film in a way that few animated musicals do, certainly nowadays. And just combine the film's just breathtaking animation and action and really good character work and music. You just get one of the biggest surprises of 2025. One of my favorite movies of 2025. And with that, chat, moving on to the next one. At number 8, another animated film. I have Zootopia 2, which, as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the original Zootopia, and I was so excited for a sequel. And Zootopia 2 is a sequel that not only honors what made the original so special, but it expands the world in exciting and meaningful ways. You know, the story essentially picks up with Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde navigating a new challenge in a city that's still learning how to balance, diversity and harmony among its citizens. In this case, they have a case that involves reptiles, the first snake in Zootopia in decades, in 100 years. And what stands out immediately is how the writing treats its themes with such sophistication, tackling issues like identity and fear and community with a really nice touch that's accessible not only just to kids, but for adults to appreciate. And the narrative, I think, just strikes a loving balance between heartfelt moments, especially between Judy and Nick, who are kind of Disney's perfect odd couple, and a lot of clever world building, just giving us something to like really invest in. And the direction and pacing throughout Zootopia 2, it feels so confident. The filmmakers have clearly thought deeply about how to expand like the city's diverse districts and cultures in really visually inventive ways. Creating new environments that feel alive and full of texture, especially when we go to like the reptile areas, and what they do with the reptiles, like visually are really, really funny and had some great laugh out loud moments. And the voice performances, they're another huge, highlight, obviously. Jennifer Goodwin and Jason Bateman, obviously returning, as Judy and Nick with such natural, ease, great chemistry. It remains the franchise's core strength. They just bring that nuance to their roles, navigating growth and conflict in a way that feels really earned and relatable. And you see their relationship deepen and develop more, and how the movie ends, it hints at something that I'm like, do it. You can do it now, and it will feel so earned. And something that people have been asking for. And new characters that are brought in to the supporting cast, they are also great. The voice acting consistently is great. The material that these guys are given is wonderful. It makes every character, big or small, feel very dimensional and engaging and fun. It's clear that just the voice cast had so much fun with their roles. You can feel their energy. It just translated so well to the screen. And again, as I've said at the top with this movie, what really makes Utopia 2, I think, so memorable and so poignant, especially in these times that we live in, is how it combines like that sharp socio-political commentary with boundless creativity and so much heart. The film doesn't shy away from difficult conversations. It actually embraces them. But it frames them in a way that's thoughtful, hopeful, and grounded in a very vibrant world that can be enjoyed, again, by both kids and adults. It's such a visually and thematically rich film, and that's why it's in my top 10. And moving on, Chad, something a little different. Moving on from animation. Number 7, I have Bring Her Back. Bring Her Back is a horror film that firmly establishes itself as one of the year's most unsettling movies. After watching this film, you'd be like, wow, that was really good. I don't feel great right now, though. Essentially, the story starts with a seemingly straightforward premise. You have these orphan siblings, Andy and Piper, older brother, little sister, and they're placed in the care of this woman, who comes off as this warm, kindly foster mother who, has issues of her own. But as, the narrative unfolds, I think the film just masterfully layers in the psychological tension and the creeping dread over this weird domestic setting. And what makes the writing so effective is, again, it's focus on the characters, the character-driven fear of grief, of vulnerability, and trust betrayed. That becomes terrifying, if not more so, than the supernatural threat itself. And the supernatural threat is crazy in this movie and very disturbing. It's very inventive. And directors, YouTubers, the Philpro brothers, Danny and Michael Philpro, they dispel just such a confident command of their filmmaking, which they already did such a great job with. Talk to Me from a couple years ago, one of my other favorite movies that was also on a previous top 10 list the year that came out. They're great at creating atmosphere, building tension scene by scene without resorting to cheap jump scares like lesser filmmakers in general. Like, I'm trying to think, where was there like a jump scare? Maybe one, but it feels so earned and it's so like shocking. It's like, oh my God. It's wonderful. Their use of pacing and really unsettling imagery. You see kind of like old video footage. And just all the like the ritualistic horror stuff and the grainy footage overall. It just adds such a feeling of dread and unease and grossness as you're watching. This is like, this is not going to end well for many of these people. And sadly, it does not end well for many of these people. But then you have like these quieter dialogue driven scenes between kind of the principal cast. And those are great. And those have like underlying of unease to them. It just amplifies the tension throughout the entire movie. And Sally Hawkins, man, I mean, of course the performances are great, but throughout the board. But Sally Hawkins, she delivers one of the most underrated performances of the year. Chilling, nuanced as this foster mother whose grief has warped her into a monster, into something so despicable and mean and sinister. She balances that like maternal wealth with like an ever-present creeping menace, making her both compelling and I think very terrifying. She does some foul things in this movie. And also the two actors who play the kids, or the foster kids, Billy Barrett and Sora Wan, they anchor their roles very well as their respective characters. You see their sibling bond and all the heart that comes with it. Oh, the tension that comes with it. And I really like that quite a bit in the movie. And I think that's what makes, Bring Her Back stand out, is how it combines horror with emotional depth. It always comes back to the emotion. The film does a great job of just exploring grief and trauma and the extremes people will go to undo loss to make themselves feel better. It grounds its, despite the supernatural things that are happening, it grounds its scares in like kind of real life human experiences of, I guess, the foster care system and what it could be. Not what it always is, but what it could be and what it has been. And it's a disturbing and intense spectacle. But it also, I think, really resonates as a psychological horror film. And it has left an impact on me long after I've watched it. And it's the movie where I want to watch it again, but I still need some time. I still need some time. But it's a great film. It's a very intense movie. And number 6, Chet, another horror film, I have Weapons. Weapons at number 6. Weapons is a horror film that manages to be frightening, but also really ambitious in the genre, like in the horror genre this year. The story is kind of deceptively simple at first. 17 children from a single classroom vanish overnight, right? Leaving only one behind. But writer-director Zach Cregger, coming off of Barbarian, which is one of my favorite horror movies of the decade, he just slowly unfolds a multi-perspective narrative that's like really intricate and really harrowing. Like each new viewpoint adds depth, reveals hidden tensions, and keeps you guessing all the way through of like, what the hell is happening in this town? And what I appreciated most was how the film treats its mystery seriously, without, again, relying on cheap jump scares. The suspense grows naturally out of character dynamics and I think the small town setting, making the horror feel really earned. Although I have to say, there are a couple of jump scares that felt unnecessary, that felt like studio notes. But the movie was at its scariest when it didn't have those moments. And Cregger's direction, I think, is more confident and visually striking than ever. He balances moments of tension with a lot of unexpected humor, too, which is great. And it serves to make the terrifying sequences hit a lot harder. Great cinematography throughout the film, too. I love the multi-perspective structure of the film. It's handled with a lot of skill, reframing a lot of events, depending on which character we're following, which I think is like 6 individual characters, 6 specific characters, and how each character essentially story connects to the broader nightmarish, horrifying situation. It keeps you engaged. And it keeps you invested. The performances are all uniformly strong across the board. Julia Garner, she stands out as this teacher whose class was, the 17 kids that were vanished. They were from her class. She's just kind of caught in the chaos, and she goes back and forth between being super vulnerable and very steely, dealing with like her own alcoholism. Josh Brolin gives a very raw, lived-in, intense performance as this grieving father. One of his kids is missing, but you also get some other wonderful performances in this movie from Benedict Wong and Alden Ehrenreich and Austin Abrams. They all round out the ensemble with performances that feel authentic and layered. And Amy Madigan, man, she delivers some of the most haunting and hilarious moments that I've seen in a film all year as Aunt Gladys. Moving seamlessly from eccentric to just downright foul, but then also really funny. The cast elevates this story, and it makes the stakes overall just feel really real. And again, I think what makes Weapons so good and so certainly so memorable is how he uses horror to explore, as great horror often does, human and societal flaws rather than just aiming for scares. It explores fear, explores like kind of the themes of blame, of fear itself, and the small town secrets, and reputations that people have. It's all woven throughout this movie, and it trusts us as the audience to piece together the meaning of all these individual events. And its ending is amazing and really surprisingly funny, but at the same time, it's still a little ambiguous, but it still makes an impact. And it's something that I've just really appreciated and still thinking about. It's one of the standout horror films of the year. And if anyone's like looking for something that's a little different within the horror genre, I think Weapons is certainly up your alley. Really enjoyed the movie. And now, Chad, we got to the top. We were in the top 5. Got to the top 5, Chad. And at number 5, I have The Long Walk. The Long Walk is a grim, absorbing adaptation of Stephen King's original novel that understands the material of that book so well. And what has made that book endure for decades. The story's central premise is you follow this group of teenage boys, about, 50 or so, about 5 dozen, who are forced into, or actually they volunteer into this relentless state-sanctioned walking contest where slowing down, stopping means death. That means a bullet to the head. And it remains brutally simple and devastatingly effective in that premise. And what makes the film work is its refusal to soften that premise, I think. The writing leans into the psychological toll of endurance rather than spectacle, allowing dread and to develop, characters to develop, essentially accumulate mile after mile. And you have friendships that form. You have friendships that fracture. They dissolve under pressure, and the story becomes less about winning and more about what it means to keep going. When hope itself feels like a liability. I think director Francis Lawrence does a great job. I think this is his best movie. He brings such a steady, controlled hand to this material, favoring atmosphere and inevitability, including shock, but he builds that. He earns that. And the direction, it emphasizes the repetition and the exhaustion, using those long stretches of marching and silence to create something that is just so uncomfortable. Like the road itself becomes a character in this movie in its own right, just endless, indifferent, completely unforgiving. And he resists the urge to glamorize the violence. It's just brutal. It's sudden. It's ugly. It's final in this movie. And I really like that. And it just escalates everything. And the performances across the board are wonderful. I mean, the whole cast, I think, does an amazing job. But for me, like, the big standouts are Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson. They spend most of the film together, and their back and forth, I think, is just so great. They deserve award recognition. I just love their dynamic. It's a friendship. It's a friendship that has just been, it's a few days old, but it feels like a friendship that's been developed for years, and that's really good. And the supporting cast, all the fellow walkers, I think they also do a really good job, and they all get their moments in this movie. And when they get their moment, it's like, it's emotionally devastating to watch. And Mark Hamill, he's a sumbitch in this movie when he makes these little kids do. And it's The Long Walk. It just stands out for like just how effective it uses this kind of minimalist approach, I suppose, of just walking straight down this road. And all the twists and turns, maybe some of the twists and turns it might have, and the peaks and the valleys, if you will. The visuals, I think, are bleak and grounded, but that's I think that's very important to capture this dystopian world. And I think the film explores really great themes of conformity, of state violence, the cost of survival. Why we let these things go on. It never for once feels heavy-handed in its commentary. It could have easily done that, but it doesn't. It's an endurance test. It's a thrilling endurance test, not just for the characters, but also for the audience. And that's precisely the point. And when the film does reach its devastating conclusion, I think The Long Walk serves as a modern classic, a modern timeless dystopian thriller. It's such a wonderful movie, and also one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations of all time. And Chad, moving on to number 4, I have The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie. This movie is a joyful reminder of why these characters, these Looney Tunes, these tunes have endured for generations. Delivering just pure cartoon chaos with a surprisingly confident sense of purpose. The story is this gloriously absurd, alien invasion involving mind-controlling bubblegum. It's exactly the kind of high-concept nonsense that suits the Looney Tune characters. And works so well is how the film embraces its own silliness. It wears it on its 2D sleeves. While still giving the narrative enough structure to sustain a feature-length runtime. It's outside of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's the best of the 2D Looney Tune movies. It gleefully spoofs classic sci-fi tropes and horror movies, but it never loses sight of what really matters here. And that's setting up situations that allow Porky Pig and Daffy Duck to collide in a world in the most destructive and hilarious ways possible. This is a great buddy film between these two characters that have been brothers, friends, enemies, and everything else in between for decades, for nearly a century. And that's on full display in this movie. Director Pete Brownguard, you can tell he has such an affection for classic animation. It's just evident in every frame of this movie. The decision to commit to fully drawn 2D animation gives this movie an immediate feeling of warmth and authenticity that feels, really rare in modern anime features. We don't get many 2D anime movies. We got a number of them this year, which is great, but it's still rare, especially with the Looney Tunes. And the visuals are so energetic. They're so expressive. They're so fun. The movie's just packed with so many background gags, so many great punchlines, visual punchlines, narrative punchlines. All the exaggerated motion. It's just perfect. It's perfect anarchy and chaos. And great comedic timing too. And the voice performances, man. The voice performances I think are a major highlight, especially Eric Bauza, who works as both Daffy and Porky, voices both of them. He captures their classic rhythms and personalities while injecting them with enough kind of modern energy to make them feel alive rather than, maybe dated museum pieces, if you will. Daffy's manic ego is on display, but there's a wholesomeness to him too. And Porky's anxious decency is there as well, but they just bounce off each other beautifully. And their dynamic becomes, really, it's the emotional anchor of the film. They're brothers. But then you have great supporting characters in this movie. Petunia Pig, you got the evil alien guy. He's wonderful. They add texture without overcrowding the story. Don't expect every Looney Tunes to show up here. Bugs Bunny doesn't have a cameo. All right, Elmer Fudd isn't chasing after Daffy and Porky at one point. It's we have some Looney Tunes characters, but it's mostly focused on these two. And I think that was a very bold choice, because they could have easily been you got to include everybody in here. Been no. It's them. It's their story. And I love that. I think the thing that makes this movie so good, just thinking about it now, it doesn't try to reinvent Looney Tunes or layer on an unnecessary sense of, sentimentality, if you will. Instead, it just celebrates it. You have the slapstick speed and irrelevance with complete loving sincerity. There's just so many great moments of genuine warmth tucked between all the explosions and spectacle sequences in this movie. It never loses its focus on these characters and why they've been universal for nearly 100 years. It's such a great film, and it's a movie I had the opportunity to see in the theater, and it's a movie I encourage other people to check out. It's beautiful. If you love these characters, if you love Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you're going to really love this movie too. And number 3, Chad, number 3, I have Companion. For the longest time, it was number 2, but still, Companion, number 3, pretty good. Companion, it's one of those films that sneaks up on you, presenting itself as a slick kind of genre piece before revealing how sharp and self-aware it really is. On the surface, it plays, the familiar sci-fi and horror territory. But the writing, that's what quickly distinguishes itself by rooting the story in deeply human flaws, in relationships, entitlement, insecurity, the need to control something or someone. And, rather than leaning solely on high concept twists, which there are some great twists in this movie, the screenplay lets the tension grow organically out of these character dynamics that we see throughout this film, using dark humor and a lot of really great violence in the movie. Like director Drew Hancock, this is his first theatrical film as far as I know. He just shows so much confidence, especially for, a feature debut. Like, the film moves at a tight, efficient pace, has a really nice rhythm to it. Visually, Companion is very clean and purposeful. Again, grounding it in a lot of that human emotion and the advancement of artificial intelligence. Great tonal balance of horror, of satire, of suspense. With this, this couple weekend gone horribly wrong, it's just handled with a lot of impressiveness. And intimacy. And the performances are a major reason why this film works as well as it does. Zoe Thatcher, who has been one of my favorite working actors in the last couple of years, loved her in Heretic last year. She is the clear standout to me in this movie, although it's still populated by some great stuff. She delivers a performance that evolves in such a fascinating way as the movie essentially unfolds. She brings a lot of warmth, a lot of vulnerability, and an undercurrent of menace to the character of Iris, making her transformation, the reveals about her certainly unsettling, but also kind of weirdly empowering. And Jack Quaid compliments her so well as her boyfriend, let's say, playing his role with that classic Quaid charm, but it's used to mask something deeply uncomfortable and despicable underneath. And I think the supporting cast do a great job too. They add a lot of texture and energy to this. They have a lot of fun moments and great sequences as well. But Companion, it's just so memorable because it's funny, it's sharp, occasionally very brutal and bloody, and it's never really careless with its ideas at all. The film uses the genre. It doesn't use like the typical tropes of the genre as a crutch. It has this nice commentary layered throughout about power and one's own autonomy and modern relationships. And that's at the forefront, essentially, of this story. And, Companion, it doesn't feel like a disposable thriller at all. And it feels just more like a pointed, entertaining reflection of a lot of just kind of contemporary relationship anxieties that we all have. And it's proof that, a well-crafted genre film has plenty to say, if not the most to say, out of many films released within any given year. So, absolutely love Companion, Chad. Highly recommend it. And number 2, Chad, this is a recent entry. I have Marty Supreme. Of course, I recently just reviewed this movie, obviously. And as I was saying in my review, Marty Supreme is the kind of film that grabs you by the collar and never really lets you go. It's a breathless, swaggering character study disguised as a sports movie. And, on paper, like the story of Marty Mauser, of course, played by Timothée Chalamet, a loud, ambitious hustler who essentially is chasing table tennis glory in 1950s America. Like, some of that, sounds familiar to other sportsmen, but the writing refuses to stand down. Sand down its rough edges, essentially. Marty isn't designed to be inspirational. in a traditional sense, let's say. He's impulsive, narcissistic, egotistical, and consistently self-sabotaging. And that choice gives the film its bite. The screenplay treats ambition as something messy and all-consuming, and the sport itself kind of becomes like a pressure cooker for the larger ideas about ego and class and the myth of that self-made American success, right? Josh Safdie's direction, as I was said in my review, is pure kinetic momentum. It's vibrating with nervous energy. It's vibrating with nervous energy, just like Timothée Chalamet. And speaking of it, Timothée Chalamet, like at the center of it all is Timothée Chalamet. He delivers his most commanding performance to date. It is his best performance to date. He plays Marty like a human spark, all bravado, barely contained panic. And he just is able to carry the film's relentless pace, and at times single-handedly. And he just makes Marty like so magnetic, even when he's frustrating, capturing the thrill and cost of someone who so truly believes in their warped idea of destiny and greatness. And the supporting cast, I think, are also great throughout the entire movie. They are like grounding counterbalances to Marty's excesses, and something for him to bounce off of. But even then, they get caught up in the whirlwind of it all too. And what makes Marty Supreme stand out is its refusal, I think, to be tidy or reassuring. It's not interested in like a clean victory or even a moral lesson. Instead, it just revels in kind of the human contradiction. A lot of humor and a lot of chaos. And the film treats sport as a performance, as an obsession, and something that can consume an individual. It's just so fast and repetitive and unforgiving. It's very much like the Safdie's other works. I think it's the most confident of them, which is saying something, because I love Good Time and I love Uncut Gems, but this one is just my favorite. It's just thrilling. It's just so funny. And it's just kind of cements itself as one of the most distinctive and really just daring character-driven films of the year, at least for myself. And that's why it's at number 2. And at number 1, Chad, this comes at no surprise. You can already guess. At number 1, I have Sinners. I love Sinners. This is my favorite movie of the year. I think it's a masterpiece. Sinners is a film that's just made with complete confidence, and it's so much confidence in its voice, blending genre, history, and character into something that's both entertaining and also very weighty. And it's essentially set in 1930s Mississippi, and of course, the story follows these twin brothers returning home to build a juke joint, only to be pulled into something darker and more mythic and more supernatural. And what impressed me most about the writing is how naturally it fuses supernatural horror with grounded human concerns of family, of legacy, community, survival, racial tensions. The vampire elements never feel like a gimmick. Instead, they work as an extension, essentially, of the film's overall themes, using folklore and tradition and culture and menace to reflect real societal tensions simmering beneath the surface, or sometimes they're just over the surface. They're there in plain view. And Ryan Coogler's direction is a major reason why this film works as well as it does. He brings such a great sense of scale while never losing sight of any intimacy, letting quiet moments breathe before unleashing bursts of terror. And visually, Sinners is so striking, just making excellent use of shadow, firelight, and period detail to create an atmosphere that feels so lived in and so ominous. And the decision to lean into large, format cinematography and a deliberate pace gives the movie a sense of great Gothic grandeur, Southern Gothic grandeur, while the blues-infused musical sequences, they just add so much rhythm and genuine soul. It just reinforces the idea, essentially, that music itself is a form of identity, of resistance, is a character within the movie itself. It's so important to the film. And the performances are on another level. So great, anchored by Michael B. Jordan in a dual role that could have felt showy and goofy and gimmicky, but instead comes across as really impressive And you can't even tell the effect is there. It's so good. But he emotionally grounds those characters. They feel so distinct. He gives each brother a distinct presence, making their bonds and their conflicts feel very authentic. And the supporting cast, I think they elevate the film too. They elevate it even further. Haley Steinfeld brings like a sharp emotional edge. Wunmi Mosaku adds that quiet power and gravity. Delroy Lindo delivers a lot of great moments of wisdom that kind of resonate deeply. And Jack O'Connell as Remick is one of the best villains of the year. He's complicated, he's menacing, he's funny, he's charismatic. Got a hell of a singing voice too. And I love what they did with vampirism and exploring aspects of it. Idea of kind of because sometimes certain aspects of vampirism are not always at the forefront of certain films anymore. And they kind of really leaned into the whole idea you have to invite them in. And that creates some great sequences in this movie. Some of my favorite of the year, some of my favorite scenes of the year. But I really loved what they did with Remick. Very fun. And also exploring the idea of a vampire hive mind, which you don't often see in a lot of vampire stories, or certainly cinematic adaptations of vampires. But for me, what ultimately makes Sinners stand out, and really the best moment, what makes Sinners the best movie of the year, is how all of its elements just kind of come together into something that's so cohesive and memorable. The music, the production design, the thematic ambition, the characters, they all reinforce one another. Just giving the film such a strong emotional taste, I guess, aftertaste. It just stays with you the entire time. It's not just a horror film or a historical genre or a thoughtful genre hybrid. It's something that kind of is genre defining, I would say. And by the time like the credits roll, Sinners, it just feels less like a one-off experiment, more of like a statement. A film that's just unafraid to take risks, wrestle with history, incorporate that into the narrative, into a genre film, and delivers just such a gripping and confident cinematic experience, which is why I consider Sinners to be the best movie of 2025, and certainly one of my favorite movies of the decade so far. But that, my friends, is my top 10 best movies of 2025. What about you guys? What are your top 10 favorite movies, along with honorable mentions this year? Already in my movies on your list? Or none of my list? You're like, Chris, you're crazy to have this or that movie on the list. You should have had this film. Where's Five Nights at Freddy's 2? What about the lore? Let me know.